The year is 1945. World War II, a conflict that ravaged nations and reshaped continents, has finally ended. The Allied powers, united in victory, are tasked with rebuilding a shattered world. Yet amidst the ruins, a new conflict emerges, one that will define the latter half of the 20th century, the Cold War. This was not a war of armies clashing on battlefields. Instead, it was a war of ideologies, a global chess match between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States, a champion of capitalism and democracy, faced off against the Soviet Union, a communist state advocating for a world free of class divisions. Their differences ran deep, shaping their worldview and their approach to global affairs. The United States, with its emphasis on individual liberty and free markets, sought to contain the spread of communism. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, aimed to expand its sphere of influence and promote communist ideology. The seeds of mistrust were sown even before the end of World War II. Agreements made at conferences like Yalta, meant to shape the post-war world, quickly unraveled as tensions between the former allies escalated. The stage was set for a decades-long standoff that would keep the world on edge. At the heart of the Cold War lay a fundamental clash of ideologies: capitalism versus communism. The United States, founded on the principles of individual liberty, free enterprise and democratic governance, stood as the champion of the capitalist world. In contrast, the Soviet Union, born out of a revolution that sought to dismantle class structures, advocated for a communist system where the state controlled the means of production and wealth was distributed more equally, at least in theory. The capitalist model, as espoused by the United States, emphasized individual initiative, competition, and the pursuit of profit as driving forces for progress. Individuals were free to own property, start businesses, and reap the rewards of their labor. The government's role was primarily to protect individual rights, maintain law and order, and foster a favorable environment for economic growth. Communism, as implemented in the Soviet Union, presented a starkly different vision. Private property was abolished and replaced with collective ownership. The state controlled industries, set production targets, and allocated resources according to its central plan. The goal was to create a classless society where everyone had equal access to resources and opportunities. These contrasting ideologies shaped the domestic policies and foreign relations of both superpowers. The United States sought to promote democracy and capitalism around the world, seeing them as interconnected systems that fostered prosperity and stability. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, supported communist movements and regimes, viewing them as allies in the struggle against capitalist imperialism. The ideological divide between the United States and the Soviet Union manifested most concretely in Europe. As World War II drew to a close, the continent lay in ruins, its economy shattered and its political landscape redrawn. Into this power vacuum stepped the two superpowers, each seeking to shape the post-war order in its image. The Soviet Union, having borne the brunt of the Nazi onslaught, moved quickly to establish its influence in Eastern Europe. Soviet troops remained stationed in countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, propping up communist governments that aligned with Moscow. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, famously described this division of Europe as an iron curtain descending from the Baltic Sea to the Adriatic. On the western side of this divide, the United States spearheaded efforts to rebuild war-torn nations and contain the spread of communism. The Marshall Plan, a massive economic aid package, provided billions of dollars to help Western European countries recover from the war. This aid, coupled with the formation of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a military alliance designed to deter Soviet aggression, solidified the United States' presence in Western Europe. Germany, once the heart of the Nazi war machine, became a focal point of Cold War tensions. Divided into communist East Germany and capitalist West Germany, Berlin, the former capital, remained a divided city deep within East German territory. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961 to stem the flow of East Germans fleeing to the west, became a potent symbol of the Cold War's stark division. Section 4, Flashpoints of Fear, the Berlin Wall and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cold War was not a static standoff, it was punctuated by periods of heightened tension and near calamity. Two events in particular brought the world to the brink of nuclear war: the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, and the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The Berlin Wall, a physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain, stood as a stark symbol of communist repression and the division of Europe. East Germany, facing a mass exodus of its citizens to the west, erected the wall to stem the flow, turning Berlin into a divided city within a divided country. The wall's construction heightened tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, with President John F. Kennedy famously declaring, "Ich bin ein Berliner," in a show of solidarity with the people of West Berlin. The Cuban Missile Crisis a year later brought the world even closer to the brink. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev, attempted to install nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. This move, seen as a direct threat to U.S. security, triggered a tense 13-day standoff between the two superpowers. President Kennedy imposed a naval blockade on Cuba, demanding the removal of the missiles. The world held its breath as the threat of nuclear war loomed large. Through a combination of diplomacy and brinkmanship, a crisis was averted. Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba in exchange for a U.S. pledge not to invade the island and a secret agreement to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey. The Cuban Missile Crisis, while ultimately resolved peacefully, served as a chilling reminder of the stakes involved in the Cold War. Section 5. Reaching for the Stars, the Space Race. The Cold War rivalry extended beyond the confines of Earth, reaching into the vast expanse of space. The space race, a competition for technological supremacy, became a new arena for the two superpowers to showcase their might and ingenuity. It began in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. This achievement sent shockwaves through the United States, which had prided itself on its technological prowess. Sputnik's success, followed by the launch of Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space in 1961, spurred the United States to accelerate its own space program. President Kennedy, determined to regain the lead, committed the nation to landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. The United States poured resources into its space agency, NASA, and embarked on a crash program to develop the necessary technology. The world watched with bated breath as the two superpowers raced to achieve this monumental goal. The culmination of the space race came in 1969 when American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," Armstrong famously declared as he took his first steps on the lunar surface. The moon landing, a triumph of human ingenuity and a testament to American determination, marked a significant victory for the United States in the Cold War rivalry.